Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Wells. I'm a resource assistant with Atticus, and today you are going to be taking part in the webinar 7 Traps That Stop Lawyers from Growing Revenue. But first, though, I want to welcome you for taking the time, and I want to talk a little bit about some logistics for this. Today's webinar is going to be led by two of our leading practice advisors, Steve Riley and David Phelps. First few things, though, is I want to talk to you about asking questions. So the way you can ask a question on a GoToWebinar is you can either send a chat message to the event organizer, that's me. You can also click the little hand icon as well, and when we are taking questions at the end of the broadcast, we'll call on you and I'll unmute you so that you can be heard. One of the most important and often asked questions we get is, will this be recorded? And the answer is, you betcha. We will be recording this, and we'll be posting a link for you to watch this again on our Atticus Facebook page and to our Atticus YouTube channel. Also, specifically, if there's anybody who would like to get that link emailed to them, you could also request that of me at Mike@Atticus Online, especially if you'd like to share it with somebody who couldn't make today's broadcast. So our speakers today are Steve Riley. Steve is an attorney and an Atticus Practice Advisor. He is a shareholder at Atticus. Steve has been coaching attorneys for more than 15 years, and he focuses on top producing attorneys that are committed to taking their practices to new levels of success. Also, we have today with us David Phelps. He's also a practice advisor with Atticus. He has been working with attorneys for more than 13 years, making him extremely qualified to assist you on marketing and practice management perspectives. So without further ado, I'd like to let you guys go ahead. Steve and Dave, are you there?
I'm here. This is Steve. David, you there?
Yes, I'm here, Steve. Thank you.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So thank you, Mike. Thanks for the introduction. So welcome to this webinar. And what we'd like to do is just kind of talk for a moment about the intention of the webinar and what we're hoping to accomplish through this webinar. Our company is celebrating its 25th anniversary, and we've worked with firms from all sizes all over the country, from solo small firms to large firms, medium firms, whatever the size may be. And one of the goals that a lot of the lawyers we work with have is looking for ways of increasing their firm revenues. And we've been teaching a workshop for the past decade or so in particular called Double Your Revenue. And David and I have learned that from teaching this workshop as well as working with firms around the country, whether it's through our other workshops and doing consulting one-on-one with law firms, that there are particular traps that we see lawyers get trapped in all the time when they go to grow their firm. Now, what we'd like to do today is share 7 of these key traps, and there's probably more. There's probably, we could probably identify at least 100 ways that we see lawyers trip over certain things and prevent themselves from growing their firm. But what we wanted to do is not only give you a trap, but also a simple recommendation that you'll be able to implement out of today's webinar. David, anything you want to say before we dive into the first trap?
No, I think that's very good and useful information, Steve. But we do want this to be about the recommendations, utilizing the knowledge that we've gained from working with lawyers over the last 25 years. So it's not just a simple rehashing of here are the problems, but we're hopefully going to be able to offer you some useful information and solutions that you can implement to address these issues.
Perfect. So this is trap number 1. And this is probably the biggest trap that we see on a consistent and regular basis. And this is failing to take time to think about your practice from a strategic perspective and to work on your practice. Now, I practiced actively for 20 years. I spent 10 years as a plaintiff's attorney and 10 years in the estate planning and elder law field. And I completely understand some of the challenges that we have in practice. And we really see a lot of practices come from what we call a crisis-driven perspective, where lawyers are dealing with a client issue, a client crisis, a staff issue, an unscheduled court hearing, this, that, and the other thing, and you feel completely out of control. And in addition to that, you're chasing cash flow, and you're trying to figure out how to keep your overhead covered, how to keep your payroll met, you figuring out how to nail your targets, whatever they may be, and a lot of lawyers feel time-starved. So it's really easy for us as consultants to say, hey, you need to take time to strategically work on your practice. But we really understand that it's very difficult to do when you are just too busy running as fast as you can. Our recommendation here is pretty straightforward. If you want to move your practice from where it's at, if you want to move your practice from a plateau, and we see this happen a lot, and I see it where lawyers have been practicing for probably 5 to 10 to 15 years, usually about the 10-year mark, they start to cap out. They see their revenues plateau out, their revenues seem to level out, and they don't seem to be making the same increase in revenue. In fact, their profits start to get squeezed because their overhead grows quicker than their ability to increase their pricing and increase their revenue. So you start to see their margins squeezed a little bit and a little bit more. And they start to get, they fall into a trap where their profits are being squeezed because they're not making any adjustments. So what we recommend is that you want to take time to think first about what's going on in your practice, then strategize and act. Sometimes lawyers just act and they don't strategize or think it through. Our suggestion, and this is a really strong suggestion, is minimally invest a day per quarter. Now, if you're sitting there saying, Steve, David, we can't do that. I just can't do it, man. A day per quarter is way too much. Then my recommendation is maybe budget 2 hours a week. If you can put aside 2 hours a week, that's what we call a project appointment or implementation appointment to work on your practice, then that would be my strong recommendation. If you can't do 2 hours a week, then my recommendation is do what I call a 15-minute improvement sprint. So at least once a day, you allocate 15 minutes to try and move some element of your practice forward, whether it's improving the process, trying to solve a strategic problem, but do something to just move it forward. Because if not, you'll just get that running on the treadmill feeling where you're just going and going and going. You're not getting further ahead in the practice. David, anything you want to add about that before I go to trap number 2?
Steve, I think it's a really critical point for shareholders or firm owners. It's cliche almost, but I like the term working on your business as opposed to working in your business, and taking a systems perspective, taking a higher level view of the business, thinking entrepreneurial about how can I improve it and get away from the day-to-day, working on case files and those types of things. It's critically important for the growth and success of a firm. So very important.
That's a very good point. The other distinction of cutting at it is lawyers will spend a tremendous amount of time improving their legal skills, but not improving their business skills. So if you have a legal skill hat on all the time, you'll never notice that the next skill that you really need to improve to move your practice forward are some of your business skills. And so the ability I use that trick, the hat trick for hockey fans, but I use the thought of, okay, do I have my business skill hat on right now, or do I have my lawyer technical skill hat on? So it's a really important distinction to think about your business skills versus your legal skills, your legal technical skills. So great. Trap number 2. Not establishing a minimum case value, and this is a really important one. Most lawyers, if they know how to do a case, will always take that type of case regardless of the value. Now, what I mean by that is that if you've been practicing for a length of time, certain types of cases will appear easy to you. Just because they're easy doesn't necessarily mean they're profitable. And just because you can do a particular type of law doesn't mean you should do a particular type of law. Sometimes lawyers will take cases outside their area of specialty or just on the fringe of their specialty, and it looks like an easy case, and they think they've priced it appropriately, and they think it's a good client. But what they discover is it starts to really throw their practice off. The recommendation here is over time to upgrade your client case value. And the quickest way to start this process is to create a minimum case threshold. So for example, let's just say that you make the determination that in your practice, if a case doesn't have a total value of a bare minimum of $5,000, then it shouldn't come in the door. So if you're looking at a case and go, wow, looking at my average case values for the past 90 days, anything under $5,000 has caused more problems than it's made of. And it may be a different case value in your firm depending on your specialty. So if you're a bankruptcy lawyer and you're doing Chapter 7s, your minimum case value may be radically different than a family law lawyer that specializes in asset disputes over $1 million. It really depends on your practice area. Same thing with contingency fee firms. It really depends on your practice area. So what we would recommend is the easiest way to get to your minimum case value is start going through a client ranking or a case ranking, and you could do something as simple as A, B, C, or D. And be clear when you're looking on the ranking process, what is the case value or your average revenue per case? And when I mean average revenue per case, let's just say for discussion purposes that you are a family law practice. And if you look at your past 50 cases over the past years, you could take your total gross revenue, and let's just say your revenue was $500,000, and you did 50 cases. Well, then you can pretty quickly, calculate what the value per case was. But if you then use that value per case and start looking at what your median point was in your practice, you can start noticing that there are a lot of cases that fall off in the bottom. So let's say about 10 to 20% of those case files probably shouldn't have come into that practice. Well, if we knew that, then we'd be a lot more selective on the front end before taking those types of cases. Our experience is if we then take another 50 cases on and we've increased our case value by, let's just say, a 10 to 20% threshold, then arguably the firm's revenue will grow by another 10 to 20% because we're dropping off the lower level cases, the lower value cases. Our recommendation is to try this for 90 days, and we gave you a sample of scorecards. This is one of the scorecards that David and I use with our clients just to start wrapping your brain around this. And so it may be that you look at a client personality type, client being nice or not so nice. David, would you mind talking about this for a minute, just to kind of walk through how this tool works?
Be happy to, Steve. I'm a huge fan of this system and this form, and as Steve alluded to, this is more of a general one. We can, depending on the practice area, get this very specific to the case type. So we've got some general characteristics, characteristics about a client that will present themselves at the point that you're having an initial conversation or doing an intake with them. So we've got some sample characteristics that you will, but basically what this tool is going to allow you to do to screen these incoming clients and during the intake process and quickly be able to decide whether or not to accept them, or whether to accept them or refer them elsewhere based on scoring. So instead of going by what what I typically see with a number of attorney clients that do go through an intake process, is they make that decision based more on gut feel. A system and having a form such as this to be able to objectively score clients on objective criteria allows you to make a better decision up front as to whether they truly are A, B, or C, or D level clients. And you can adjust, as I mentioned, the criteria, client personality, value, whether or not it's collectible, is the referral source, a trusted referrer, that's going to lead them to be higher. In an A case, if they found you via internet search or Google, that's going to push them lower. So you have all these different objective criteria that you can weight and score and come up with a letter grade to be able to assign to those clients up front. But a very useful tool to allow you to better decide, are you, going to take this client in the door? Do they meet the characteristics you've set forth for A or B, or are they lower?
And the other interesting thing about this is that once you kind of go through this process, you'll start to notice that you have an ideal client type. Once you get really clear on the ideal client type, you can talk to your referral sources and you can hone your marketing more with a more focused eye, with the intention of just trying to bring in those high-value A cases. So it really has a lot of value to it. Ultimately, the point for our purposes in today's revenue is that the lawyers that learn to focus on their best clients and their best cases will see their revenues increase. Most lawyers think all cases and all clients are of equal value. And until you take a step back and say, okay, seriously, what are my most profitable cases? And which ones are my most valuable cases? And which are my most valuable clients? You'll have a tendency to get caught in a trap where everything looks the same. Great. With that, let's shift to trap number 3. This is a really important one because I see this a lot. I see this a lot with lawyers between the ages of probably 40s to 50s and on up, that they get burned out and they don't really learn to protect themselves from burnout. You know, the law of the jealous mistress, your practice will take everything that you can give it, and your clients will take everything that you can give them. And if you volunteer for the Bar Association, they will take everything you can give them. And you really want to get clear that if you're playing for a long career, if you're looking at a multi-decade career, you really got to learn to protect the most valuable asset, which at the end of the day is going to be you. And a lot of lawyers, as their career accelerates, just start running faster and they start working harder. And these two strategies will just end up with greater burnout. We have a lot of lawyers that show up with a tremendous loss of meaning. They've lost meaning in what they're doing. They have lost meaning in their practice. They've lost meaning to a certain extent in their lives because they've just worked so hard for so long that the only thing they know anymore is working. So our recommendation is to take a massive step back. If that message made any sense to you, you're the golden goose of the practice, and really to overwork, over-caffeinate, not let the golden goose sleep, not let the golden goose exercise, not feed the golden goose nutritional food, you're gonna hurt the golden goose. So what we'd recommend is to really protect yourself. It's number one, what can you do to protect your physical health? What are we going to do to make sure that your energy levels stay high and your confidence levels stay high? One of the really intriguing things I've seen is I've seen lawyers increase their revenues by taking on exercise programs. I know it sounds crazy, but what I think happens is as a lawyer takes on an exercise program, their energy levels increase, they lose weight, so they get higher confidence in themselves, and they're able to do more in less time. So we see a huge jump in productivity just around taking care of the lawyer. Number two is protect your mental health. A lot of lawyers we talk to have what we call the used to life. I used to take a lot of vacation. I used to spend a lot of time with my family. I used to golf. I used to exercise. I used to read. I used to paint. I used to go to the movies. And, you know, we notice that the practice, and I'll be the first to, concede that the practice can demand an extraordinary amount of mental energy. Your judgment is the most important thing you bring to your cases with your clients. And if you're not protecting your mental health and protecting your ability to focus, you're probably going to be putting a very valuable asset at risk. And then ultimately we see lawyers really sacrifice the most important relationships in their lives. It may be with their spouse, it may be with their children, it may be with their parents and other family members, siblings, but we see them not put boundaries around the practice, not stop the practice from stealing from their personal lives. And our experience is the lawyers that learn to put boundaries and protect their time, protect their energies, and protect those relationships ultimately are able to grow the revenues because they prune back some of the deadwood in their practice. They prune back some of the sick areas, and they focus just on the best areas of their practice. So this is a little esoteric to a certain extent, but it's one of the ones that I've seen over and over and over as a trap. If you don't protect yourself from burnout, if you're not taking good care of your health, and you want to play a game like doubling your revenue or increasing your revenue by 20 or 30%, and you're running as fast as you can, and you're totally maxed out, you won't have the energy, the concentration capability, or the physical ability to take your practice to the next level. I see it over and over and over again. David, anything you want to add to that before I move to the next one?
No, but I think it's a very important message and one not to be overlooked.
Thank you. Trap number 4. Trap number 4 is failing to plan and train for strategic delegation. Well, to make this make sense, I want to draw a distinction between tactical delegation and strategic delegation. Understanding the difference between these two is a key thing to understanding this particular point. Tactical delegation is usually when you just hand off a task or a project to someone. A strategic delegation is where you hand off an entire system or process or department to someone. So for example, I'll use a really simple one that hopefully everybody on the call will allow me to use, which is drafting a simple will. I think hopefully everybody on the call, probably 80% of the people on the call, have drafted a simple will at some point in their career. Well, if you have a will come in, you talk to the client, you got some basic information, and you hand the information to a paralegal and say, please make a rough draft of this, that would be a tactical delegation. A systemic delegation or process delegation would be sitting down with the paralegal and teaching the paralegal on how to meet with the clients and do the initial intake and get the basic information, make a first draft of the will, and then arrange for an appointment so the client can review the will with the paralegal, and then you can step in just to make sure everything is done according to your standards in your practice. But in that case, that would be a strategic delegation. That would be a complete delegation of that process. In my experience, most lawyers have about 50% of what's on their desk could be strategically delegated, but they're managing it by task. So if you're looking to grow your revenues and grow your practice, look for ways that you can strategically delegate a component of your practice. The second part of this is to do this effectively, you want to be able to train your support team systemically. You want to think through, how do I do this? Most lawyers do 3 forms of training. One is trial by fire, where they basically say, here, go do this, figure it out. 2 is abdication. This is your problem now, not mine, go figure it out. And 3 is drive-by training. And I call it drive-by training because the staff person's stuck, they can't figure out what to do, they don't know how to move it forward, and you're running either to a hearing or you're running to do something else, and you just kind of bark at them, do it this way, do it this way, do it this way. And that's kind of drive-by training. If you're going to grow your revenue, you need to think through what parts of the practice am I currently doing now that can I systemically and strategically delegate to a team member. Our recommendation here is pretty simple. Don't go crazy. Don't go crazy. Don't do a lot of stuff. Just pick one thing that over the next 90 days that you can strategically delegate. So if you're on the call and you're paying attention to this and you're taking notes, my recommendation right now is just write it down. What is the one thing I want to strategically delegate? Just take a second, scratch it on a piece of paper, whatever works for you. Don't do that obviously if you're driving, but if you're sitting at your desk, just scratch it out. Now, when you do this, you may discover the first time that you strategically delegate something that it may fail miserably. If it fails miserably, it's not because the concept doesn't work. It means that there's something in your practice that's not quite ready for that move yet. It might be that you don't have the right team. It might be that you don't have the right training. It might be that you haven't thought through the process. But if it fails, I would suggest that you take a step back and study why. Why did that fail? Why did that not work? And really try and learn from that experience, because quite frankly, that's got a tremendous, tremendous benefit for you if you can solve that particular issue. David, anything you want to add to trap 4 before I move on?
Steve, one point, the suggesting that attorneys on this call be mindful of what we refer to as the self-enhancement bias, or the reason, one of the top reasons we hear attorneys say they don't delegate enough is that, nobody in the firm can do it as good as I can, therefore I don't delegate as much as I should. That in and of itself is a trap attorneys can fall into, and it's from an efficiency perspective and a profitability perspective, you're going to be in serious trouble if you're falling into that mindset. So that's what we want to encourage you to get away from that and realize if you can implement a workable system and a framework like Steve is discussing here, you can delegate more, be more effective, and ultimately be more profitable. So just one warning there on.
Yeah, I think that particular bias is a killer one, because what makes you really great as a lawyer is also the thing that particular bias is what's going to get in your way in your ability to delegate effectively. And you'll be ultimately trapped. You won't be able to grow the revenue of your firm beyond that bias. And that's what it is, it's a bias. So that's perfect. Trap number 5 is pricing too low and staying there. Well, what do we mean by that? If we look at your practice, and we look at the practices that we work with around the country, we see 3 common themes on a regular basis. Number 1 is that once a lawyer sets their rate, whether that rate is a fixed price for a particular package of services or an hourly rate for a particular service, once they feel confident about that, they have a tendency to stay at that rate for a period of time, for, in my experience, a long, long period of time, sometimes 3 to 4 to 5 to 10 years. And they never look at adjusting their pricing. They never look at ways of improving their pricing or how they price those services. The second thing is we see lawyers not teaching their support team, whether that be their associate attorneys, their paralegals, any other billable producers inside the firm, how to be more effective doing this. They have a tendency to think that the support team or the associates and paralegals will just learn by osmosis or learn by watching the lawyer. And in our experience, it takes some training and coaching and some consulting by you with your support team, teaching them how to do this. Everything from, how to manage a case file from a financial perspective, but also how to be really great in communicating to clients and also be really great in collecting on it. And then the last but not least, we see lawyers discount all the time. And a lot of lawyers say, well, I don't discount. I never discount. In our experience, if you don't bill on time and the client has an upset about the bill, you're probably going to end up discounting the bill. If you don't enter in all your time because you don't think it was worth it, you're discounting. If you are having a client come in and haggle with you a little bit about the price or about the services, you're discounting. If you're doing fixed price and you're worried that the client won't pay for your services at that very moment, sometimes you cut the price at that point in time, you're discounting. So not taking a step back and saying, gosh, where am I currently discounting in my firm, is one of the ways that you can grow your revenues without doing anything really crazy. You just look at, say, wow, I'm discounting here, here, and here. Another classic example of discounting is answering questions for free. If you're a billable shop and you're not really paying attention to your billable time, we see a lot of lawyers collect a lot of revenue just by paying attention to capturing the time of the work that they're putting in. David, anything you want to say about the challenge before I switch over to the recommendation here?
No. No, go right ahead.
Okay, great. So the recommendations, just want to encourage you. We encourage you. We could probably talk for 2 days straight about pricing strategies, how to use pricing context, how to talk to clients about the value you're creating. But usually the easiest thing to do, especially on a webinar like this, is I just want to encourage you to go back and have it looking at a gentle raising of rates and the elimination of discounts, and see if there's ways that you can tighten that in your practice so you can actually increase your revenue just by raising your rates. And it may be raising the rates per hour basis, it may be on a fixed price basis, and it may be a 10% raise, it may be a 20% raise, whatever you feel comfortable with. But my recommendation is that you evaluate how you're pricing your services now and see what you can do to just take it up a little bit more and see if you're going to be able to feel comfortable with that. One of the challenges we all, all lawyers have in their practice is what I'm charging fair to the client, and is what I'm charging fair to me and fair to my practice. So that's always a dynamic. My joke is most lawyers are anti-authoritarians with a do-gooder streak. What I mean by that is they want to do really well by people, but you can't tell them how to do it. But in this particular area, I would just encourage you to take a step back and say, when's the last time I've evaluated my hourly rates? When's the last time I've raised them? Where am I giving away work for free? And where am I discounting? And see if you can tighten that. Because if you can tighten that, I promise you'll have an increase in revenue. Trap number 6. Now, David, I've been talking for quite a bit, and I feel like I've been hogging the microphone. Would you mind carefully talking about referral-based marketing for us?
Yes, it would be my pleasure. The subject near and dear to my heart. So I'm going to talk for a moment about trap number 6, which is the lack of a referral-based marketing strategy. There may be some contingency-based or personal injury attorneys or other practice areas who do a lot of advertising, and even with the apologies to those groups, I would say that overall most practitioners, regardless of the area of practice they're in, recognize and know that they need a referral-based marketing strategy and system to be successful. They know they need to develop a wide network of individuals in their market, in their community, that know, like, and trust them and regularly refer them work. So if we accept that premise that you recognize that you need this referral base out there sending you good, high-quality clients, knowing that still many practitioners fail to implement any kind of strategy, or their actions in terms of marketing activity are very inconsistent. That's typically what we see. And why is this? Why is the activity level always seem to be going up and down? The reasons we typically will hear is, and everybody on the call, I'm sure, can identify with this in some form or fashion: too busy, have no time. What we'll see is when an attorney gets busy, maybe they have a major client deadline, maybe they have a trial, things come up in your businesses, in your practices. But what we see is, when these things occur, marketing is almost always the first thing to get pushed to the back burner or pushed aside. You push that off. 1 month you engage in some marketing activities, drive referral-based business. Some months you're too busy, you don't do it, and there's that up and down of activity. If anybody on the call understands what I'm talking about, you're then very familiar with the second and third points on this slide. You're going to see some serious challenges. You're going to have significant swings in cash flow, and then from a business perspective, it's going to be very difficult for you to systemically upgrade your clients because you're always chasing business, and as we talked about earlier, sometimes D&D level business. From a business perspective, the other challenge obviously is, if you're not going to move up, costs continue to climb, you have a real problem. So those are some of the challenges associated with the lack of a referral-based system. And now I want to talk for a minute, next slide please. I want to talk for a moment about some of the recommendations. So you say, well, what can I do to address this problem? Few simple things you can do, and I'll touch on a couple of these. One of the first things is to put together a simple referral-based marketing plan. You don't need a 10-page strategic marketing plan. We certainly build those for clients. I can put together a detailed strategic marketing plan for a client, but if you don't have that kind of time, there's a few things you can do very quickly to get this in motion. One of the easiest things you can do is identify those targets or folks that you want to connect with and establish or build a relationship and drive referrals. So let's look at 2 categories of individuals in your market that you could target. First one obviously is those who are already sending you referrals now. those are the most valuable to your practice. And then the second list of individuals, and I won't say attorneys, as it's certainly any professional or any person in your market, but those are people that you know that have the potential to send you business, but are not. People that you want to send you great work. The marketing term for this is prospects. They're prospective referral sources for you. So list those two folks out. Study those lists. Look at some characteristics about them. Engage them. And some of our other suggestions, put together a list of some things you can do to engage and come in contact with them. And then the last point is, when you're engaged in conversation with them, when you're around them, ask. This is one of the biggest issues that one of the biggest reasons why folks will fail in referral-based marketing or not drive the kind of business that they really would like to see is they're simply failing to ask in a comfortable, ethical way. And the next slide, we've got a couple of sort of points of things you could consider. But when you get together with, this is on a colleague side, if you're networking or engaging with a fellow attorney, ask them, hey, really enjoy working with you. What could we do together? Say the words. Don't sit back and wait for somebody to grab you and say, hey, David, I really need to work with you. Let's collaborate on something. Make the effort. And then if it's not a fellow attorney, ask for the referral in a comfortable, ethical way. If you're wrapping up a matter, you're concluding a matter with a client, and you're shaking their hand and saying, hey, it's been real pleasure working with you, take the next step and say, do me a favor. Going forward, you have a friend, colleague, family member who could utilize our services, please don't hesitate to send them my way. In fact, here's a couple of my cards. We'll take great care of them. Really appreciate it. Not about sounding desperate or needy. It's not, I don't believe, unethical in any way, but that's the difference there, is you're actually doing the ask. And what we see is those attorneys who actually ask for the referrals much more likely to receive them versus the ones who fall into that trap of the thinking is, well, I'm going to do good work and the business will come. Everybody on this call is in a very competitive business and very competitive markets. You have to be a little bit more aggressive about driving business. So just some things for everybody to consider.
Thank you, David. These two are terrific ones, and we could probably easily walk through 20 ways of asking for business ethically, and these are two examples that are just fun examples. One is bored. Dan, I'm bored out of my mind. Is there any cases that you have currently that you could send me because I really need something fun to sink my teeth into? And then fun, if you have a great referral source that you really like, and say, Patty, in the last case we worked with, I had a great time with it. I enjoy your clients. If there's any other clients that you have like that, I would be delighted to work with them. So when you look at this, you want to think through what are ways that you can ask. And as David said, a lot of lawyers go out there and play what I call bumper car marketing. They go up there and they bump up against different people, but they never get really clear on what they're looking for, and they don't ask for the work. And that's asking the really important part. Based on our studies, the lawyers that ask for the work will get 50% more business than the lawyers that don't ask for the work. And the second component of that is it's scary, man. It is totally scary when you're making your first request for a referral or first request for business. But once you get the hang of it, it gets to be a lot of fun. It gets really, really easy. And it's really, really challenging the first time. But after that, you'll get the hang of it. You'll do totally great with that. So great. Thank you, David. Number 7. This is an interesting one, and we thought this one might have been a little too esoteric and too big to talk about, but we decided to go for it anyway. And this is where lawyers have no plan to deal with change. As our industry itself is changing quickly. A couple of years ago, I did a presentation called the 5 predictions about the 5 big predictions about what will change in the legal industry. And one of the predictions I made was that Walmart would open up legal clinics. And I got a huge chuckle from the audience, and people laughed and said that will never happen. Well, about a year ago, Walmart opened up its first legal clinic in Canada. Now, this may not impact your type of your practice, but it is showing that the legal industry is not only changing from companies like LegalZoom and Rocket Lawyer and the plethora of internet-based kits and services and the ability that other firms have to market in your market space just based on search engine optimization. But the industry is changing very, very quickly because technology is so disruptive. And if you're not thinking through what's my plan to deal with change, you're going to get caught flat-footed. And my experience with change is something that nobody likes happening to them. They're totally fine with change happening to other people, but they don't like change happening to them. You know, it's too stressful, it's too disruptive. And the other thing that we keep hearing from lawyers, it feels like there's time is speeding up. Things are speeding up, and they have less actual time to think about how to deal with change. And change is going to occur no matter what. It's just going to continue. That's the essence of a capitalistic society. That's the essence of who we are as human beings. That's the essence of our industry at large. It changes and will evolve. And even though we don't like it, we don't have a great solution for it other than taking a step back and saying, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with this? How do I come ahead of this? So here are the 3 recommendations that we have to take a step to implement change. Number 1 is to have a compelling reason. And in our business, we deal with change all the time. And what I mean by that is that we help lawyers implement change. We help lawyers say, you know, I want to put in a compensation system for my associates. I want to, you know, rethink my compensation system among my partners. That's change. And there's 3 key elements to implement change. Number 1 is you've got to have a compelling reason to implement the change. The reason has to be exciting for you. The reason has to be scary enough for you. You've got to have a compelling reason to put change into your life. Number 2 is an accountability and follow-up structure. We've studied this. We've read studies about this. We've been watching lawyers that are very, very effective at implementing change, and we watch lawyers that are not effective. There are some phenomenal studies that conclude that if you are a person that goes through a class or a workshop or a seminar, there's a 98% chance that whatever they learned will be totally worthless and wasted. Because what will end up happening is it will end up on a shelf and they will not implement it. There's a 2% chance that they will implement it. However, if there's an accountability and follow-up structure supporting the implementation, the statistic changes radically. So if you leave someone to their own device to implement change in their life, it's not going to work. If you create an accountability structure and a follow-up structure to support change, it will, the probability of change occurring will increase dramatically. You can see this type of structure in everything from Weight Watchers to Alcoholics Anonymous to other support groups where people get together and support each other in implementing change. This is one of the reasons in our programs we think that accountability and follow-up structures are so crucial. So when you go look at how to implement change out of this webinar, you've got to ask yourself, who's going to hold me accountable? And what's going to be the follow-up structure? Is there going to be a follow-up structure? How will follow-up occur here so I can have someone help me in implementing my change? And number 3 is strategy and coaching. We talked about strategy. Coaching is feedback on the implementation of strategy. So when you look at this, if you're going to implement change in your practice or anywhere else in your life, we believe that these are the 3 key ingredients of change: compelling reason, accountability and follow-up structure, and strategy and coaching. David, before I move to the next slide, is there anything you want to say about recommendations?
No, I think those are all very well stated. Steve, nothing
Thank
out
you,
on that point.
So as we start to move forward in the last 5 to 10 minutes of our webinar together, the question or the title of this webinar was about growing the revenue. What are the 7 traps in growing your revenue? And one of the challenges that we have in thinking things through as human beings is trying to figure out, okay, how do we implement what we just heard and what we just learned? So my suggestion is that you just pick one idea that you learned out of this webinar. My suggestion would be it would be something that you would think would be the most impactful, or it might be the one that you could implement the quickest. But if there was one idea that you could implement out of this webinar that you heard today that you thought was valuable to you, write it down. Write it down. Say, I'm going to implement the following thing, and this is how I'm going to implement it. Because without that action, you'll just have the knowledge. In my experience, lawyers are probably the fastest conceptual learners on the planet because we solve problems every day. But the knowing of the topic or the knowing of the concept is the booby prize. It means nothing. Taking action is really what is of value. So the fact that you heard the 7 traps means very little unless you take some action off of one of the traps. So I would say pick one and just pick one and say, I'm going to implement this one over the next 90 days. Now, with that being said, if you thought this was a valuable webinar and you're interested in talking further or learning more about our company, we have 2 suggestions. One is we are going around the country teaching the Double Your Revenue Workshop, which is really kind of a celebration of our 25th anniversary. We've been teaching this workshop for about a decade. We've had about 300 lawyers go through this workshop. It's been a lot of fun. It's been followed by Lawyers USA Today. Lawyers Weekly. It's been a lot of fun, and we've had a tremendous time teaching it. And my experience is that's probably one of the big breakthrough workshops that we teach for a lot of lawyers. Now, the workshop itself is 1 day, and it's led by myself or Mark Powers, and the locations of the workshops are in Fort Lauderdale, which will be next month on the 12th, Boston on March 31st, White Plains, New York on May 14th, June 1st, New York, Chicago, July 23rd, and of course the rest of the days, August, we're going to Austin, and Charlotte will be September 24th. November 5th, we'll go to Atlanta, and the last one of the year will be December 12th in Orlando. And the price for that is $995 for the first attorney and $795 for the second attorney or assistant. So it's a pretty mild investment for the rate of return. Now, typically the workshop will last from 8:30 in the morning to 5 p.m. and no more than 25 attorneys. Our experience is that there's no more than 25 lawyers. If it gets more than that, it gets kind of awkward and kind of gets out of control. Our goal is trying to keep it limited to 25. Now, we have, if you're thinking the workshop's not a good fit for you, then I'm going to talk in a moment, or have David, I'm going to ask you to talk in a moment about practice diagnostics and say, I'm not really a workshop kind of guy. I'm not really sure if this works for me. But I do have one proposal for you. Now, if you're interested in the Double Your Revenue Workshop, one of our best-selling books is Time Management for Attorneys, and this is written by our partners, Mark Powers and Sean McNally. It's a fantastic book on time management skills for lawyers. And if you're interested and you register for this workshop, the Double Your Revenue Workshop, in 7 days of this webinar, will include the time management book at no additional charge for you. And the value of the book is about $80. So if you're interested and you think you would like to do the Double Your Revenue Workshop, I would do it, and I would definitely register for it so that you can get the value from also picking up the time management book. Now, if you're sitting there going, nah, I'm not a workshop kind of guy or gal, then you might want to consider doing something different. And David, would you mind talking for a minute about what a practice diagnostic is and how that works?
Happy to, Steve. Thank you. Everybody, Steve mentioned if the workshop isn't for a number of reasons for you, one other option that's a really fantastic way to assess your practice, look at both your behavioral style, your personality style, how that impacts others, how you market systems, a lot of different things. The practice diagnostic is a great undertaking for you to consider. As I've said, we'll help you provide some real insight into your practice. It's comprised of 2 components. We'll have you complete a DISC behavioral assessment online, and then you will get the report from the disc. And as a part of the diagnostic conversation, you'll spend about an hour on the phone with a trained Atticus Practice Advisor, review the disc results of the personality profile with you, and discuss how your behavioral style can impact and shape, marketing activities, how you interact with your staff, and help impact some real change, purposeful change in your both life and your practice. Provide you with some real insight there. The second portion of the diagnostic is the practice portion, where we'll assess and look at your marketing client development system, your time management system, your HR and staffing system, and your financial management system. And we'll assess all 4 areas, establish a baseline, your current operational status, and then we'll make some observations on each of those categories and make some recommendations or areas that could be improved upon. It's a really powerful assessment that is comprised of a couple of different pieces. It takes you a little bit of time to complete the disc, and then a 1-hour call. So that's a little bit more about the practice diagnostic. And then, let's see, can we go to the next slide? Of course, what does it cost? $275. That's a one-time fee. The disc, anybody familiar with the disc? The disc in and of itself will cost approximately $125. So, the investment, we feel is a real significant return in terms of cost. So how you can sign up for one, drop me a line via email, davidp@Atticus Online. Contact me. We can have one of our assistants do scheduling for you, and it's very simple. We'll get you to log in for the disc and schedule the 1-hour diagnostic conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you. So if there's any questions that you have about either the W Revenue Workshop or the Practice Diagnostic, please don't hesitate to contact us. Our website, I think was mentioned, was www.atticusonline.com. There's all kinds of information there. There's a really big library there. If you've got anything that you'd like to check out, or any just want to check out the testimonials, check us out further, by all means doing that. And then once again, we've just got a few minutes left. And if there's any questions about the webinar or the traps that we talked about or anything else, we'd be more than happy to talk about them. Just use the chat